Firstly, man, like, thank you so much for sitting down with me. As
Nah,
as well as like we met each other in Kiev, so we can actually like verify that you were actually there. Because I think there's been so many like fake people who are like, yeah, I fought there, and they just didn't.
yeah, I've heard a few of them myself actually, and I pulled one up when I was coming back through Melbourne. Actually, he's just like, yeah. I've went over there. I'm like, oh, where'd you go? He's like, oh, Kiev. I'm like, did you fight in Kiev? Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was technically. I'm like, oh, okay. And then he looked down at the bandages. He's like, how'd you get that? I'm like, fighting in Ukraine. And he pretty much just stopped talking, I widened his eyes, and just walked away. He
Fuck.
just completely paid me off. I'm like, oh, geez. I'm sure it'd probably attempt to pick up some chicks, but I don't know. It's not very impressive for a lot of people. Uh,
No, no, it's not that impressive. There's a lot of sex tourists still popping around some of those areas too.
yeah, absolutely. I did notice that one.
Yeah. So like I guess first off the bat, like what drove you to want to go and fight for a foreign country in an incredibly dangerous environment?
Well, it actually started. So it's about day three of the war when President Zelensky actually asked for foreign intervention, so just foreign assistance. He said anyone who's a experienced foreign fighter, one of them come join. And it was actually then I was just, no, I've got to do this. This is just my time. I couldn't live with myself in a period of time where I've got military experience. I'm fit. I'm able to use my skills that I've learned to apply them to help a country in need. There's no
Yeah.
way that I could be a 50 or 60-year-old man and just think, wow, I wish I had done something. I wish I had done something. I didn't want to be one of those people. So I just said, no, I'm going to do something. And the entire step of the way, I was just expecting to be pretty much rejected. I told all my family, I'm like, look, I could go all the way there and
Mm.
might just be directing people on which toilet to use. Like I was just so committed to the cause that I was just like, no, I'm willing to do absolutely anything.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in the time of it's all that invasion. I was actually told, why don't you go fight for Myanmar? Why don't you go fight for Sudan or Yemen? And unfortunately, well, the opportunity for say legal foreign fighters, it's just not there in those kind of situations. So
Yeah.
um, this close to Europe, it didn't. Well, I have no Ukrainian friends, no Ukrainian family or descent, but just that close to Europe as well. It's absolutely unethical in this time and age. 2022, having an invasion that pretty much becomes a like World War One. It's just not fair on anybody. It
Yeah.
sets a really, really bad world standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how was your family when you decided that you wanted to, leave Australia and go and fight for another country? How did they take it?
Oh, that's yeah.
Yeah.
Um, there was a few members that took some convincing, but the rest of them just actually, believe it or not, my mum actually said, "This is who you are. I can't fight you on this one."
Yeah.
And I was just the most. She was the one I was shocked. I was really scared about telling her, but most of the family agreed, and they said, this is who you are. This is what you train for. I couldn't um, rather you go over there than face the me that stayed behind and didn't go and have to live with myself.
Yeah.
So they were more than happy to actually help me out to get ready to go. So
Right.
very big ups to them.
And how did you feel about the idea of, I guess, some would say foreign fighters, other would say foreign mercenary, but if you were captured, you would have been tried as a foreign mercenary, and by every, I guess, example so far, been put on death row. You wouldn't be treated as a POW by what we've seen at least. How did you feel about that?
Well, that was actually part of my preparation. I had to be completely ready to face the consequences of what I'd done.
Yes.
Um, I knew full well that if I was caught, I'd be killed. And that was actually a risk that it was worth taking. For the overall, for the big picture, I was pretty much went there prepared to die for this cause. So
Yeah.
it was a really, really rough thing. I had about 2 weeks of mental prep, but I had all up a month to get my head in the right space to do it. And it was, there was no hesitation. I got on the plane, no problem. Crossed the border, no problem. Didn't hesitate the entire time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how was your treatment once you cross the border? I guess what's that process? Once you cross into that border, what then happens, and how's the treatment from there?
Well, I wanted to be as kind of proficient as possible. I didn't want to get towed around, so I ended up contacting the embassy in Australia,
Mm.
and they gave me a location to cross the border into, and they
Yeah.
gave me a brief of, say, this is the tent you're going to go talk to. There'll be someone representing there, and so it was kind of a little bit nerve-wracking because there was no other information
Right.
given. It was just, hey, go to this tent. I asked, what do you need? And then they just said, bring boots, and that was it.
Right.
They didn't say bring as much equipment as you can. I chose to do that, thankfully, off my own back. But I crossed the border. There was someone waiting there at the tent, exactly like they said, and I just said, "Yep, here to join the Legion," and no, no word of English whatsoever. Just a quick wave, over here,
Yeah.
and then they just basically told me to sit down, and I waited probably about 20 minutes to half hour, and then yeah, a car came out, and again, as you would know from being in Ukraine, you just have to follow the bouncing ball,
Yes.
and if you don't follow the bouncing ball, you just won't go anywhere. So, and then another a guy rocked up in like beat up car, and you said get in the car, and then that was it. In every part of someone's instinct would probably say, hey, I don't know this person at all.
Yeah.
I don't speak their language, but you just get in the beat up car and you get taken to on your adventure, I guess.
Yeah.
Stops pretty
Right.
quickly if you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. And I've heard like horror stories, I guess, through the grapevine of taking passports and not letting you then leave the country and stuff. Was there any of that when at least you crossed in?
I heard that. I did hear about that, and so I actually just got a printout of my passport and everything like that, just in case. But
Yeah,
realistically, it wasn't. So customs they kept me there for probably about 2 hours
right.
to let me in the country. I don't know why. I see it as maybe a deterrent. Make someone think about really what they're doing.
Yes,
Because I mean, it gives you a lot of time to think and say, oh, maybe this isn't for me.
that was Ukrainian
Um,
customs.
yeah,
Yes,
Ukrainians, yeah, just to cross over from Poland into Ukraine.
yes,
But I was prepared for that too. I was willing to ditch everything I had to run across country if things got that bad. But
yes, yes.
no, everyone was quite good. I wouldn't say smooth. It's definitely not smooth. It's not like giving your passport over at Heathrow. It's pretty scary
Yeah,
because
right.
they'll give your passport to someone and they'll give it to someone else and they'll walk around in another room and you might not see your passport for hours. And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
yeah, and then it comes back and you go, oh, thankfully I wasn't one of the guys that, had the passports taken. But no,
yeah.
all pretty good.
And once you got picked up, that by that beta car and taken to, I guess a training facility or something.
No, actually, we got held up over just over the border. There was like a certain location that had been designated. Um, I guess it would change
Yeah,
frequently, but there was a dead set location where there was some representative who spoke very, very minuscule English. In our case, so at the time, it was a school. Then another time, from what I've heard, it was just someone's residential house. But it's more like, again, it's like a staging area when they put you there just so you can think about what you're doing and so they can coordinate a bus. If five guys rock up, then they'll stay overnight there. And if one person rocks up, they might be there for another 2 days until more people come,
right.
just so they can fill the car a little bit easier. But it was a pretty confronting place, especially you just get over the border from Poland,
Mm,
where still very, very much, like they're established, good economy. People have a lot of good care. And just as you get over in this place, there was up to probably about 60 people,
yeah.
and about 30 of those 20 of those people were kids who either didn't have parents or who just couldn't cross the border because they hadn't actually heard back from um, both parents. Just to avoid the child trafficking, they make sure that both parents are confirmed that they know that their child is leaving,
Yeah.
which I think is a good system. But of course, it falls to the cracks when they can't get onto, say, dad because he's out in fighting the war.
Yeah.
So pretty confronting place that, there's a lot of people and they're very, very much damaged. They're waiting for confirmation to cross the border, or they're actually waiting to go further in country to return home. So yeah, worse, you've got up to 60 to maybe even 80 people, and you've only got two toilets. And um, yeah, thankfully the volunteer organizations there were working pretty good to make sure people were fed. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was a pretty grim place to stay.
Yeah. And then from there, you move towards to get familiarized on weapon systems and get allocated units.
Not even particularly. So you actually get moved to another location, and this is again was another staging area where they would just they you basically be given a rough interview, and the rough interview could mean one Ukrainian commander comes through and he says, "Hey, do you have military experience? Do you have combat experience? What's your specialty? Where you come from? What's your motives for being in this war?" Very, very critical questions, and honesty really has to come in handy, because if you lie, and a fair few guys lie, they're not going to call you out for being a liar. They're actually going to send you to where you think. So if you think you want to be a helicopter pilot or a tank operator or a sniper, which most of them are, you're going to go to the place to be a sniper, and if you're not, then you are going to get thrown completely in the deep end,
Right.
absolutely out of your element. So you've got to be really honest. Now they divided how old are you, um, what's your military experience, and if you have combat experience or not. And there's about 3 to 4 branches of where they're going to send you from that. Now in this staging area, I had clearly military experience, had medical experience, and I'd also gone to Afghanistan before. So I was basically pushed through. I was only actually at that staging area for about 4 hours.
Yeah. Right.
Um, and that was actually delayed because we ended up getting an air raid. So we had to just go bunker down, which sometimes they can be fun. Um, Especially just you get to go down, and when people are all scared and stuff, you end up talking a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, got sifted through and put to another staging area, which is where you'll get your equipment. Mostly they'll source body armor for you. A lot of the times you won't get your body armor there though.
Yeah.
They'll just figure out that you need body armor. It's a bit more of I guess, a bureaucratic staging area. It's just they get your details. They can make sure that you can get a military ID. You will get your weapon
Yes.
and a helmet. You might get a helmet, but it's a place that you go there and then, do you have good enough boots to last for 3 months, or do you have a sleeping bag? All this other stuff that they'll be
Yeah.
able to source that there.
Right. Okay.
Um,
That was going to be my next question. Was what would happen if you answered no to those questions?
or if you answered say, oh, I don't have any military experience, then they will send you to actual. I've heard a lot of the times they'll send you to Ukrainian basic training. So it
Right.
might be a month usually. And it's hard. Like it is hard. To,
Yeah. I bet.
they're pushing a lot into a month, and so it's it's 5 a.m. wake ups to maybe working 7 o'clock in the night, and they're just doing it every day for a month. There's no days off.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. That's to make sure someone can comprehend what they're actually up against and
Yes.
what they're trying to do. You get a lot of, uh, I guess, like cowboys come in and they're like, yeah, 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 I've military experience, and they've just played Call of Duty,
Right.
and so they get there and they might not know military lingo, they might not know what they're doing. Something simple, they guys didn't know what a bound was,
Right.
and didn't and all the things, yeah, it's okay. You're allowed to not know what they are, but the guys need to make sure that they know who's on their left and right. And if you say that you are what you are, but not that, guys lose trust in you very, very quickly,
Yeah.
and it's not pretty at all. Yeah, it's not pretty at all. When I went to my third staging area, so where you do the bureaucratic sifting through. There was one guy who rocked up and flat out had lied immediately by saying that he was, ex Foreign Legion, and he'd done private security in all these different countries. And you're sitting in a room, but there was actually four ex Legionnaires, and so clearly they did the turn of the head and they started asking pretty direct questions, and
Mm.
it gets heated really, really quickly, you know.
Right.
And then we found out that that guy had lied. We gave him a second chance to redeem himself, and he'd lied again. And so he actually was basically given the gentle way to, yeah, not with us, move on. And
Yeah. Right.
yeah, he was gone within an hour. So um, just because you don't know if someone lies about, say, their background, then you don't know what else they're lying about.
Of
But
course.
we did find out later in the week that that guy, he was actually Russian born, and he just posed a great, like a pretty big security risk to the guys. So they're pretty right in their assumptions.
Yeah, very much so. And through this process, like once you've done this, and we'll skip forward to like I guess when you're I guess getting familiarized with some of the weapon systems and whatever. How was I guess the treatment from these commanders to the foreign fighters such as yourselves?
Well, we had so per unit of foreign fighters, you could be about 14 to 16,
Yeah.
could be as little as 8. They'll get segregated into their certain tents, and you'll usually have an overarching Ukrainian commander who can speak okay amount of English, and they'll be the ones overseeing you, and they'll be the ones that give you the ticket of your unit, the ticket
Yeah.
of approval if you're ready to go fight, and um, all that kind of stuff. You you slip between the cracks very, very easy. The unit, it all depends on when you get there. So depending on your hierarchy, get there
Yeah.
first, you're the first out. So the a team will rock up and they'll be there. They'll be there first, no other team, and then another group of guys come through, and they'll pick the best guys from the other ones. Say people who can operate a javelin, people with special forces, any kind of sniper ability, and they'll just pull someone from the other unit. And so some units get left with pretty pretty rough dregs.
Right.
Um, Now the ones that are really, really good, they'll get a very good Ukrainian commander. Um, our Ukrainian commander, literally, he only actually intervened for administration. So
Right.
when we ask, hey, we have guys that need boots, or we have guys that need mag pouches, that was the only time that he would really kind of communicate with us. Um, yeah, they were just so far stretched. I think there was 4 units at the time, and there was only 2 Ukrainian commanders. So we were lucky to even have one. And this guy, he was quite good in that he focused a lot on filling the gaps of training. So he actually assigned us to go get like stinger training, javelin training, and even like days at the range to go shoot.
Right.
However, all the actual the military skills that you need, say your bounding or your medical drills,
Mm.
any kind of section bonding and stuff like that, that was all on the onus of whoever took charge.
Right.
We had a guy who did take charge because he was older, he had a lot of experience, and unfortunately, like he couldn't comprehend the different nationalities.
Mm.
So unfortunately, it didn't work out, and he ended up leaving anyway. But you had to be really motivated, and you had to be a good leader from the get-go
Yes.
immediately, because you're really myself being I was the only Australian there, and so when it came to drills and everything, I disagreed with like a lot what they did. Except at that point I was outnumbered by, say 5 Americans, so I
Yeah.
chose to take initiative and learn the American system. Um, it's just kind of what you got to do. The commanders had no intervention on that. For all we could have just been like lazy, really lazy, like hamburger eaters who did no training for I don't know how however long, say 3 weeks, no training.
Yeah.
But we chose to um, best. Um, it's best for your survival, but it also actually helps to weed out your unit.
Yeah.
You determine really quickly who you want on your team. It's literally the way I equate it to is like this really silly adult, no, silly childlike game of Survivor. Whereas, oh, we don't like that guy. Why don't we like him? Okay, that's why we get him. We're getting him off the island, and
Yeah.
yeah, they get pushed further back into another unit.
Right. And what was the expectation of you guys as the foreign fighters? So I've talked to a few foreign guys and I've heard everything from, quote, you're here to be suicide soldiers through to you're getting one or two magazines and getting shipped to the front. I guess, how did you feel that the treatment was, and is there any truth in that?
There definitely is truth in that. I do have a friend, he was there from day one, and he was given a rifle that did not work. They had 30 round magazines and they were only able to load them up 15 because the magazine was broken. He was only given two. He could only successfully actually let 2 rounds out of his rifle before it had a catastrophic jam. I know that did happen, and I know there is truth to that, but it was very early days, and I, by the time that I'd got there, which was I think 2 months after the war had started, they'd had their processes a little bit more sorted out. Um, Being that we had these staging areas to weed people out.
Mm.
Um, the weeding people out actually helped for the efficiency of everything. So you didn't have to train someone from scratch, and people knew what they were doing. Um, yeah, there was still a few COD warriors, but no, that's all right. I did hear about the suicide soldiers thing as well, but unfortunately, how bad the initial invasion was, um, a lot of people, a lot of people just did not know what they were in for. A lot of the foreign soldiers had come from doing their tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, or just no experience whatsoever, and it's definitely different. It's
Yeah.
incomprehensibly different.
I
You just got to
bet.
be you got to be prepared for everything. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So the
everything.
context that I'd really heard that in was that the Ukrainian upper echelon commanders were more willing to put foreign fighters in the incredibly dangerous areas where there's pretty much no chance they're coming back, rather than I guess the local national Ukrainian forces. That was what I heard off an American guy when I was transferring through an element. But I can't verify anything, of course. Like, you were there.
Yeah, that you heard correct. It's all up to the discretion of those commanders,
Yeah.
and in our case, we were that. We were like the poster boys that were supposed to go and inflict a lot of damage or whatever we were supposed to do. And yeah, it was, well, we'll put you there. You figure it out because if it works, awesome, well done. But if it doesn't work, then meh, no Ukrainian lives lost. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
So you feel,
unfortunately,
yeah.
that's true.
So you think they didn't really care that much if you got killed?
It's discretion of the commander. So unfortunately, there was a lot of power put in the hands of some of these commanders, and so there's not enough time for them to check. Okay, how are they conducting business? How effective are their units, and what are their units doing? So right now, I know I've got a few friends that are still fighting over there, and they said they've come across commanders who actually care about them,
Right.
and they make sure they get full intelligence briefs, and if it's too ridiculous or there's not enough information, they won't send them out. But not all of the commanders are like that. Some of them are just you'll hear the word like divide, 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 go, and it's just go, go, go. Um,
Right.
yeah, so that could mean that you're marked up with a couple of AK-47s and you've got to sit in a hole and defend against tanks, or attack with anything. You don't have any HE or any kind of rocket capability, and you're supposed to sit in a position and you're supposed to stay there just because. Um, some of the commanders seem to still have that very, very Soviet style of just charge. And unfortunately, it doesn't transfer a lot to us. So we kind of step up and say, hey, where's our intelligence, or where, what's the point in this?
Yeah.
And you don't get answers. You just don't.
Has there
Just go,
been
just
has
go.
there been many foreigners die because of that attitude on unwinnable
Uh
battles?
yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, there has been. Yeah. Especially for if all the information bottlenecks to the one commander, and that
Yeah.
commander doesn't have uh, doesn't have a good opinion of you, or he doesn't have time to talk about you, they'll. I actually have heard of one where a crew had sent out on a reconnaissance, and two of them ended up dying because they walked through a minefield. Now they knew that the minefield was there. It was just, I don't know. Sorry, I forgot to tell you. Maybe didn't give him a map. Unfortunately, yeah, it just does happen like that. There has been some pretty senseless deaths.
Yeah. Do you have any idea of how many have actually died? Because there's numbers on both sides, but it's so conflicting.
It is very conflicting, very conflicting. So I have absolutely no idea. Even the numbers, we heard that there was about at one point they're saying there was about 20,000 foreigners in country fighting. But that is definitely not true. There can't be 20,000 of us. Realistically, was there for 2 months, and I maybe came across 100.
Right.
The units are spread out, but the units have relatively good turnaround, so they won't keep guys in a position for too long. For the foreigners,
Okay.
particularly, they won't keep them there for too long. They'll actually rotate them out, and yeah, so all the ones coming through and coming back, yeah, there's probably definitely not 20,000 in there.
Right. And do you feel, I guess more just to clarify, that the commanders, at least some of them, maybe on the majority or the minority, um, cared less about the foreigners' lives than the Ukrainians' lives? Like if they had to send a unit forward, they would be picking the foreign fighters to go forward.
Yeah, I really couldn't say so myself.
Yeah.
I'm actually sitting on the fence of maybe that the commanders actually just did not know what they were doing. They
Right.
were maybe field promoted because their other commanders had died, and they just didn't know what they were doing. And so lives were just numbers, and
Yeah.
so they couldn't comprehend how to move, how to coordinate anything. They were just very, very ill of experience. Um, that's kind of the opinion I'm going to stick with, because it,
Yeah.
it makes me a lot more comforting knowing that maybe someone didn't quite know what they're doing, and that they're sorting all that out now, rather than a commander that just had literally malicious intent. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
it was just a few that I'd come across. They were just absolutely drawn out. Like, hadn't some of them might not have even had a. Actually, I do know one hadn't even taken a holiday since 2014.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's just
so he
crazy.
was good. He was a good guy, but definitely definitely crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And what sort of percentage are you thinking are dying? Because I've heard things down to like whole units just getting just wiped out and guys fleeing, like as well as not only deaths, like how many are just abandoning? Because like you said, you could just be put in a foxhole somewhere with an AK and tanks roll up. So the American guys that I met, they reckon they lay on the ground for multiple days of just constant Russian shelling with no support, and they ended up just pulling their ripcord on all their gear and just running clean skin, and literally just running back to the nearest town to try and hitchhike a lift out. Like, are there many people like deserting positions that are unsupported and or just
Absolutely, definitely. Yeah, it have. So you probably say maybe about 40%. For 40%, it wouldn't be a desertion, but I'd say a lot of them are just combat ineffective. So
right?
they've just they've dropped their weapons. They're just sitting in the hole and they're just praying for someone to come and pick them up and take them home.
Yeah,
Um, I'd call it all up probably about 40%. Um, the death though, it's definitely up there, but it's very, very conflicting.
right.
So we heard a lot of the time, oh, this person's dead, this person's dead, and I don't know how it starts in the rumor mill. Like I somehow it came back to me that I was dead. And
Right.
so, I mean, it very, very conflicting. Um, any kind of numbers. Uh, I think most of the time is that once the initial wave of um, say foreign fighters come in, they get weeded out really quickly, and it's a trial by fire.
Right.
So they finally face artillery, or they face drone strikes, or they face tanks, and they go no. So I think the death toll actually would be quite low because the desertion rate is so high.
Right.
Um, yeah. So, but again, I really don't know. We were never really told much. It's almost like a very isolated community. You know
Yeah.
your unit, and you might know your sister unit, but you didn't really associate with anybody else. They kind of, it's not that they didn't let you. It was just never structured that way. You'd never come across each other. Um,
Yeah.
when we were coming into Kiev for our last staging area before we got sent out out east,
Which is
is
where
that
you and me
the,
had a beer to
yeah,
to add a
yeah,
personal thing in this. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. Well, you gotta get let
Could have
loose every
been
now and
could have
again.
been the last beer for either of us. Yeah.
Absolutely, you gotta like when I was saying I was prepared to die. You've also got to be prepared to live a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Fucking oath. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can't go there on a diet.
Yeah. Of course. Um.
Hmm.
So sorry, I cut you off. So you're going through Kiev for a staging area.
Yeah, for the final staging area, but the unit that just as we rocked up, a unit had been sent out.
Mm.
And then when we were there for a few days, another unit got brought in, and then when we headed out, another unit got brought in. So it's almost like a circular rotation, and you just don't come across that, like you don't come across each other.
Yeah.
Um, which a lot of the units you might only spend a day with each other when they come back. So you ask them their stories and where they've been and everything like that, so you can gather as much of a picture as you can before you get sent there. Because like credit to the foreign fighters that did it on day one. They were literally just dropped. Put here, stay here. Here's this weapon. Just front towards enemy. That was it. So credit to them. Pretty brave individuals. But yeah, so we got one of my friends who was over there fighting in like Rashun, and he stayed because he
Yeah.
just was actually too scared to run away, because you were copying artillery that much. And he said after a while of fatigue and and hunger and stuff, he said you just switched off and just stayed. And that actually, credit to him, he's actually a real hero because he was honest in saying that he was just so scared that he couldn't even run away.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's actually pretty honest, pretty down to earth opinion, to be honest.
And do you feel like at any point, if you wanted to leave, that you could have left?
Here's the thing, actually, it was pretty easy. if you wanted to, you could leave.
Right.
Um, that wasn't that wasn't the problem. I guess it's when you're actually there's no more steps back. At any part of the staging areas, you could have just said, "No, I don't want to do this anymore." And they say,
Yeah.
"Okay, cool, no worries." I think they can put you on a train and you can head over to the border, and then that's it. Your job's done. They'll thank you, and then that's it, easy. Um, it's when you are actually in your operational area. Um,
Yes.
your operational area, it's yeah, sure, you can leave, you can refuse to fight, but you're putting a lot of people in a tough situation, and you're putting yourself in a worse situation.
Yes.
Um, yeah, definitely, you can't outrun artillery. That's a
It's a given.
pretty
Yeah.
pretty big one.
Yeah.
A few foreigners, who I know, found that out the hard way. You can't outrun artillery.
And then did they
Um,
get killed?
yeah, yeah. So, few of them did get killed.
Fuck.
Um, the people who your survivability is vastly improved by your level of calm and just faith, just faith. If
Yeah.
you're sitting in a hole and you're getting bombed, just stay in the hole. All right,
Yeah.
you just stay there. And if you think, oh, it's all right, we can make it to the tree line. From in their case, yeah, you can't make it to the tree line.
Yeah. And how
Yeah.
was it? How was it on that zero line? There's no journalists there. There's not much video coming back. How fucking insane is it? Like how is that Russian artillery? Because I've heard off another foreign bloke who wasn't willing to speak to me on video. He was like, mate, anyone who says the Russians have a supply issue of artillery is fucking lying because it was just constant.
But yeah. Oh, mate, I heard that there was a little bit of a lull recently because of they bombed the factory that
Yeah,
was basically storing a lot of munitions. I think that halted them or paused them, if mind you, for a few hours, and
yeah,
then they had a supply back within 3 days. It was up to running normal again. Um, some of my friends from my previous unit that went out on a job, they were pretty much just sent there to waste artillery shells. And I like to think that like, wow, but at least they're getting rid of the artillery shells. They're not going to be killing any civilians. They're not going to be bombing any kind of pieces of equipment, and they're not going to be bombing buildings. But it just never stopped. It was at that same time that the artillery was bombing them. There was still artillery coming into Mykolaiv. So
right.
yeah, it was no skin off their back
And
bombing these guys.
did those three guys who went to sort of waste artillery shells, are they alive? Do you know?
Yeah, thankfully. So we had two injuries from
Yeah,
that. And thank one of them, he is absolutely lucky to be alive. He ended up having about 8 pieces of shrapnel removed from his body.
shit.
Um, and one of them was actually through and through the neck. So he's very lucky.
Jesus
Um,
Christ. Right.
yeah, and then another one as well. He ended up surviving again by being calm and staying in his hole. So
Yeah.
everywhere around his position was completely decimated except for his hole. So he was very very lucky. Um, Thankfully no fatalities on that mission.
Yeah,
Good.
right.
Yeah, that's the
No,
best
for
you can
sure.
hope for. Just no fatalities. If someone gets
Yeah.
injured, it's unfortunate, but they can live to tell their story.
Yeah. And I know there's so much conflicting stuff because I guess the propaganda and the only way to see what's happening, I guess, a lot is through Telegram groups and stuff. But in those frontline towns and cities, is your experience that Russians are bombing everything, or they're at least bombing specifically military targets and targeting military stuff? And there is, of course, damage then that happens to civilians and civilian structures, or is it just
Now,
all out going for it?
it's all out going. They just send it. I feel at some points I'm like, I don't even think they're checking whereabouts they're definitely not checking the calculations on their artillery pieces. They're
Right.
just sending it. A few times where um one of the buildings had been hit near us, and now this was a residential area. Had no, there was no follow up. So usually, if you're going and think for a barrage, it's going to go bang, bang, bang. It's just going to keep coming in, and it was just pretty much just a stray shot. I think they got a general area that they wanted to shoot at, and they just sent it.
Yeah.
I thought it's what they're trying to do is just like make it so uncomfortable and so awful that that Ukraine gets put in a position where they say have to surrender to the will of the Russians, because they are bombing hospitals, they are bombing shopping centers, and densely populated areas, and just residential areas where your grandparents could be living, and they'll
Yeah.
just bomb it.
Are there any military targets in those residential areas? Like
Believe
even
it or
amongst them?
not, the entire time I was there was one military target that they hit, and that was
Right.
one, and that was because it was pretty much like a staging area. So
Yeah.
I guess they were targeting either for casualties that could potentially fight in the war, or they were actually trying to take out the I guess munitions and like weapons and stuff. So that made sense. That was the only one that made sense. The rest of them were just bombing Nana's house.
Right.
um,
Okay.
putting some holes in some shopping centers and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, which just makes me. This is the whole reason I had to go. Dude, it just makes me feel so gutted, even to this day, that that you can be bombed, you can be killed just for going to the supermarket to grab
Yeah.
yourself food or water. That's what makes me really, really angry.
Because what a lot of the pro-Russian stuff will both say and show, I guess, online is it might be, a photograph of a shopping center hit by a rocket or an artillery shell or something, and then it will show that there was, storage of weapons there or soldiers sleeping there or something. It's more just like I can't confirm or anything of that. It's more just getting like your experience on like is there any like Ukrainian goods or military stuff being stored in civilian areas that you have seen at least?
No, well, in the kind of war that it is, and the kind of layout is that there would be military everywhere.
Yeah,
So they're sleeping in basements, they're sleeping in residential areas, but it's very, very, it's not a big spread. In one of the towns that we were in, so we were staying in like a I guess just a bigger, just a family house.
yeah, right.
And so the family has moved out and there's been no one in there. So we've just gone in and we've been sleeping there. But
Yeah,
that's pretty much our entire unit in one house, not a unit spread over 6 houses.
yes,
And the buildings that actually I'd seen been hit, there was no one in there, thankfully. So there was no one in there because they'd all cleared out. And so I think the Russians are just assuming that there's military personnel in every single house, and so let's just bomb every single house, regardless of who's in there or not.
yes, right.
Um, that's just their approach to it. Some of the towns that north of Kiev are just pretty much just unlivable, just rubble.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, unfortunately, it's because of that. Just clear it out as much as that they can.
And did you have any experience with the Ukrainian artillery and how that was? Was that almost similar, or was it?
No, I didn't experience any supporting artillery. None of my friends have either. We've actually asked about that. We were told when we were going in for our mission that we would have artillery support, and we didn't get it. Again, a failure of communication is that we weren't
Right.
even given a H hour. So, usually if you have artillery supporting you, you know exactly when they're going to be shooting, you know exactly where they're going to be shooting, and at what time they'll start.
Yeah.
And so that's when you know that you get out of that area, you know where they're going to shoot, and then once they're done, then you can go in. But we never experienced it. My friends were also told the same thing, and I feel that it might just be a strategy to make foreigners feel comfortable. Oh, we've got artillery, we've got eyes in the sky, we've got this, you guys are right, and it's just you're going in blind. Yeah.
Shit. Did you have any support? Did you have Medevac care? Did you have
Um,
choppers,
here,
jets? If you didn't have
well,
artillery, like yeah,
well, it's depending on where you are, really. We were thankfully lucky enough. We got hit so quickly that the vehicles that were set to drop us off hadn't actually got to leave yet.
Right.
So by sheer luck, we actually had vehicles that could have gotten us out. But yeah, I know of a few friends that they've had to wait for hours, sometimes even days for vehicles, or they just run the risk and they have to exfil for kilometers. A friend of mine who I met in the hospital in Dnipro, he said he had to medevac himself and he had to run about 20 kilometers south just to get to a small town. And then in the town, you run the risk of them being Russian sympathizers or, um, potentially just not wanting to help you out. So he thankfully found some Ukrainians, and they ended up driving him in the back of their car to the hospital. And then from the hospital they sorted him out and sent him to Dnipro. But yeah, you do. It is entirely dependent on where you are and what you have. The vehicles have to keep moving very, very quickly, or they have to be stationary so much so that they can be camouflaged. Um, they're just too big of a target.
Right.
So yeah, that even when we first got hit, one of the vehicles actually the driver refused to go down the road to go pick up one of our friends who unfortunately like he got hit and he couldn't walk.
Yeah.
And he was too unsafe for him to be dragged because it was a basically a spinal injury.
Yes.
I think actually the only way that this driver actually would turn around was one of our other friends who's just crazy, cocked his weapon and held his weapon to this guy's head. He said, "You're driving back to get my friend, or I'm going to shoot you."
So this
And
is a Ukrainian driver refusing.
yeah, Ukrainian driver, yeah, driving an
A soldier. Yeah.
American Humvee.
Right.
Yeah, soldier. Um, just I guess in his head he was either too scared or he calculated the risks and said, "You've already been hit by artillery. I don't want to lose the vehicle because resources are pretty stretched. That they're not going to risk a vehicle for no reason. And if it's one death or one vehicle, they I think they will just choose the death." And so
Right.
my friend who was thankfully with the vehicle just racked it, held it to his head, and was like, "Nah, this is what you're doing."
This is it.
Yeah, yeah, this is it. So thankfully, I think moving that guy in the condition that he was probably would have killed him. So he's very, very lucky to be alive, and all thanks to a little bit of Grand Theft Auto.
A bit of Grand
Yeah,
Theft Auto, hey? Fucking hell.
yeah, yeah. Gets pretty rogue. Yeah, he's
Mate.
kind of you have to put a lot of trust in the people around you, and the people around you are definitely not the people that you would maybe hang out with in the street or in your civilian life. A lot of the guys, some of the best operators and the best soldiers I met were um, absolutely made to be warriors. They're not good in normal society.
Right. Okay. And is that a very common experience like that? No exfil, no artillery. Like, did your friends who were serving is that pretty
Yeah, it's
common?
pretty common. Yeah, very, very common.
Yeah. Right.
It's just I don't know what they're doing. Maybe they're focusing their artillery in different places, but for us, it's just not there. You don't feel the presence that you have any support. And that's one of the things that I'd mentally prepared for before I left. But a lot of other guys couldn't comprehend that when they got there, and usually just the American um, clientele they struggle with that the most because of all the nations out there, they are the most supported when they actually go into these operations. And
Yes.
so to know that you're going into this place and you just don't have anything, you've got yourself, you've got your own moral compass, you've got your own bravery, and you've got the mates beside you, and that's it. And a lot of the time, that's pretty much all you need. Um, especially
I guess, but you're going up against a superpower with everything.
absolutely, it's just it, it's all you need. You just need to inflict damage a lot of the times. So they don't really maybe don't trust a lot of foreigners to do direct missions. It's a foreigners aren't going to be responsible for any kind of pushback. They might be reconnaissance units, or they might be just quick, like hit units that will just go in there. They'll blow up a tank and then they'll run. They'll get away. Um,
Right.
I don't think we're trusted entirely with the grand picture um, of I guess the Ukrainian army. Ukrainian army, they'll have a lot of numbers, and then they'll be responsible for the pushback. But for when it comes to foreigner, you just got to be prepared to have nothing. Um, I guess that's like very, very hard for people to comprehend.
And do you felt like it was appreciated that you'd come, across the world to a separate country that you had basically nothing to do with? Did you feel like it was appreciated that you came here to potentially lay down your life for their nation?
Absolutely. I mean, you got a few comments here and there. I guess a lot of the time it came down to personality and differences. These guys are, considered foreigners to be precious and needing all this stuff, and um, wanting to save their own lives. But overall, the feeling, even when you're in Kiev, is actually overwhelming. The amount of respect that people have for you because you've come so far, and you are doing your best to support that country. Very, very like heartbreaking scenes is when you've got women and you've got children and stuff that just want to give you a hug.
Yeah,
They want
right.
to give you something and they've got nothing to give. But yeah, it's just very, 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 very heartfelt and overwhelming.
Yeah,
So the overall Ukrainian opinion that what I've come across was it made you feel really good. It made you feel really appreciated to be there. From the military perspective, say the commanders and stuff, they just always seem to give you the impression that you were just a lot of work and that you were precious and I just can't be bothered with you. But thankfully you go out in the street and you get all this thank.
yeah,
But when you're staying in the green, the Ukrainian commanders don't really care about you.
yeah. And what were the living conditions like there?
Oh well, pretty awful. Not gonna lie,
Yeah,
pretty awful. I'll say the basically the first staging area that was I stayed in the longest. So there was a temporary accommodation, and there was another temporary accommodation, and then there was one that was a little bit more permanent, and it was just a tent.
yeah.
And you'd have, I think at most we ever had was about 16 guys in this tent, and it was pretty cramped and awful. There's no hygiene standards or anything. There's no facilities or infrastructure that could allow you to be clean. I think all up, we had three showers. Um, three showers. I think I was there for maybe about 2.5 weeks.
Right.
And three showers, and that's doing all sorts of drills, crawling through mud, having to, uh, use use drop holes, use anything, and you can't have a shower. And that's fine.
Yeah,
But then the next area that we were at was actually pretty much any accommodation you could find. It was they had certain buildings that they'd pretty much commandeered, and you were kind of just made your bed wherever. I was lucky enough. I found a basically like an someone's old room, and
yeah.
so I got a bed. But again, these places haven't been cleaned in I don't know how long. So if you expect good living conditions, and well, we had running water, but it came at about a trickle. So you're better off walking outside with soap when it rains. And there was never hot water or anything like that. It was imagine a share house with 100 guys and none of them know how to clean.
Yeah.
That's pretty much your standard. You've got to become an animal to thrive.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. And what about the food? Because you've mentioned to me in passing, like if you want to get fed, don't go.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So the they might feed you if you're in a certain staging area. They might have mess timings, so you have to get that timing. But if you're training during that time, then you don't get fed. They're not going to put anything in the kitchen and put it on hold for you. You just won't eat. So you got to rely on having previously bought Snickers or bag of chips or something like that, and that was how you had to operate. When it came to say staying in our location in Kiev, the food was brought to you, but this was not standard edible food.
Right.
There's just the most heinous stuff, and at risk of your own health, it was just recommended just don't really bother too much.
Right. Okay.
So thankfully we're in Kiev, so we just have to go and buy our own food and stuff, which really, really was quite nice, to be honest. When you had the opportunity to go out and kind of experience the life that some of these people are living within the city, it's really nice reprieve from sitting in a hole and eating Snickers because you don't have any food. Now, when we went to actually into any kind of road move, it's a big country. It's a huge
Yeah, it's
country.
massive. Yeah.
So any road move you're doing, you like 8 hours, I think was the minimum that we did.
Yes.
The worst one we did was probably about 17 and a half hours, which ended up taking about 31 hours
Jeez.
because it just stopped, halts.
Yeah.
It's not luxurious. And so on that, we're actually given a ration pack. And so we were like, hell yeah, this is the best, like
Yeah.
awesome. Until we got on the bus, we cracked it open, and pretty much everything but a dry biscuits and jam was not edible unless you had hot water.
Oh,
So
right.
we got
Okay.
stitched up. We got no way of boiling water. We've got no facilitation for that whatsoever. And so on this bus for 31 hours, which is no, pretty much just dry crackers and some jam.
Shit.
Yeah, I mean, some people pay a fortune for F45 and other shred diets, but yeah, just join up with the Legion. I guess you get it done for free. I lost about 10 kilos.
And you lost a little bit of weight with a body part you're missing too. So that I guess helps.
Absolutely, and I lose a lot of overall weight because it took the bone out as well. My
Yeah.
bone takes up a little bit of weight, so yeah, I feel like I had a good gain.
Yeah.
Good gain from this situation.
Well, if you're comfortable, can you talk us through that situation of you guys getting hit and you getting wounded, and I guess the outcome of that for you and the gentleman with you?
Oh yeah. So we started our patrol and we had no intelligence whatsoever. Our intelligence was clear this building. There's either 5 floors or there's 9 floors. We don't have a picture of the building, but you're just gonna have to we'll get a Ukrainian commander who can just point it out to you. And so we go, okay, well, that sounds like a terrible idea, but let's do it anyway. So we started our patrol, walking up, and our position had already been honed in on by Russian artillery. So
Yes.
either it was seen by drone footage, it was actually reported in by so Russian sympathizers, because there were still some in the area, and or it was just had been seen. Now we started probably got about 10 minutes, probably not even that, to be honest, probably about 7 minutes in, and the first shell came down and hit the pretty much like just forward of the front of our patrol line. So myself, a friend of mine who was in front of me, and the friend of mine behind me, we suffered the hit of the first round, and then the second round came in and hit the front of our position. Thankfully, we didn't actually go through a lot of drills, but they actually must have been relying on our forward. When the first round comes out, the contact drill might be to run forward, and we didn't. We actually stayed in position, and so the next round came in. It should have actually hit dead center of our packet, but we didn't. But thankfully, it didn't. Um, so three of my friends, well, two of my friends and myself, we got injured in the first round, and then the second round came and killed three of our guys who were just up the front. Which
Right.
one of them ended up being the Ukrainian commander.
Right.
So he was the guy with all the intelligence that refused to tell anybody. When he died, the guys didn't know which building they were supposed to clear or which area of operation they had no command whatsoever. And thankfully, one of my friends, a Canadian bloke, he ended up stepping up and basically ordering people to just get to the nearest building and that they would start clearing into incrementally. So clear that building, move on to the next one, clear that building, move on to the next one, and so on and so forth. So in the end, they didn't actually clear the building that was originally supposed to because they just couldn't get there. It was just such a mess, and they didn't know which building they were targeting. So just utter confusion. When it happened, the round probably landed about 2 meters away from me. So miraculous, absolutely miraculous that I'm even still alive. And all the fragmentation hit my chest plate and my helmet. Um, Thankfully, at the time, I was carrying a rocket launcher, and it ended up messing up my shoulder. So I stopped. I reshuffled it, so I put it on the ground, picked it back up, put it on my shoulder, and that was actually what saved my life because if I was 3 seconds ahead of where I was, it would have been a direct hit. I would have been all over. So the hand initially, it honestly it was very, very, very painful. The shock never actually kicked in. The whole initial when it happens, you don't feel anything. Now I can guarantee it felt pretty awful. I'm not gonna lie.
I fucking imagine, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. My ring finger ended up being like basically dangling from the flesh that was still on the hand. So
Yeah.
my glove was completely ripped apart, but it still had like little finger pockets intact. So I just put my finger back inside my glove and folded over on itself, and my thumb was basically like blown apart. And I again grabbed all the meat and put it in on itself, and then I was thinking at the time, I was like, I'll quickly just wrap it up, and I can keep fighting. But I initially thought that we got contacted from the left by perhaps even an RPG because they say you hear artillery. We didn't hear any of it. There was no warning for the first round. There was no whistle. There was nothing. It was just bang, instant bang.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we heard the second one, so we got time to call for incoming, so guys could get down. Because this fragmentation, man, it goes everywhere, and
bro.
it messes you up. It does. Yeah, a lot of the guys, you think this little piece of fragmentation that might only be the size of a match head, if that hits you in perhaps even the thigh, you can't use your leg. Like it's just debilitates you that quickly. In my case, I still to this day can't believe it because as soon as I got hit, I quickly ran to probably about 20 meters to a relatively thicker tree, and I actually picked up my rifle to try to aim it down the road that was basically adjacent from us.
Right.
And my rifle fell completely through my hand, and it was like my entire fingers, all of them were just spaghetti. It just fell through, and I was like, oh shit. This is bad. So I locked my foregrip over my wrist, so I could still take that sight picture. And while I was just holding it down, I was like looking at my hand, and I'm going, oh, like at this point, it was gushing blood just everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, ah, shit, I can't. Like basically, I knew at that point I started to get pretty angry because I'm now completely combat ineffective, and I felt fine. I did feel fine. I was like, no, it's a fight, but I could not use any of my fingers. They wouldn't cooperate as much as what I would try to think about it. I could not move anything. And the pain was pretty much overwhelming, but still never went into shock. Real shame. So yeah, quickly I put on my tourniquet, and they were already calling for a medic for one of my friends who was still on the ground. thankfully, the one behind me, I think I wore a lot of the shrapnel that should have been hitting him. So
Right.
that was good. My helmet was like pretty much ripped up, and my chest plate had copped a little bit of damage too. So very, very lucky. I basically buffered it for him.
Yeah.
So he ended up getting assisted out. Just two blokes getting on either side of him and walking him out. But the other guy, he was down for the count. He was not going anywhere anytime soon. So again, like I said, the carjacking. They ended up going and go pick him up, and our medic had run up and actually started to patch him up on the spot. Even though, and this is actually a very, very open position, you would never ever ever do this, but the circumstances just meant this guy cared more about our friend that was injured than himself, because he went out open and started to patch this guy because he could not drag him in fear of actually killing him that way. So credit to that medic. I ended up calling for calling for medic, but not for myself, just for somebody else, because I thought we're gonna need this guy was a bit of a bigger guy, and we're gonna need at least three guys to safely get him out.
Right.
And yeah, thankfully one of my friends just rocks up. He's oh yeah, that's pretty bad. And I'm like, yeah, well, won't be playing guitar for a while. And that was pretty much the tempo. I'm like, well, there's no point complaining about it, busted up hand. Yeah, I was more than prepared to completely lose the hand. I thought I would at one period of time. And I was just, I'm still alive, and I'm happy to be alive. So bugger the hand.
So how did the rest of that exfil for the medevac go for the gentleman on the ground injured?
Well, after the carjacking went down, they went and picked him up.
So
and
the carjacking, you're meaning, was it a civilian vehicle you're like hot wired to?
No, it was an American Humvee. It was driven by a Ukrainian, but he just refused to.
Sorry. So this is the
drive.
guy he had to point his weapon at and go get him. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
One of our mates who I'm still to this day, I just commend so much. Absolute loose unit. Such a loose unit. And yeah, just held a gun to his head and said, you're gonna go pick up this guy.
Yeah.
And we loaded him into the back as easy as we could. And then
what sort of injuries did he have?
So he basically lost like 40% of his lower lumbar. So just above his hip on the right side, he'd done that. He lost a lot of his back.
Right.
He'd also caught like fragmentation and stuff, say, in the leg, and I think he even caught a little bit in the face. I can't quite remember. Very small. It was like a through and through in the cheek. So
yeah,
not really too bad. Overall, I am thinking, it's not even that bad. It's just a stab through the cheek, but yeah, it is pretty bad. Yeah, so it got him out, and I was basically able to run. So I had assistance from one of my friends who ran with me, because I was actually worried that I would go into shock, and if I was to go into shock, then yeah, you become pretty incoherent. So I actually said, mate, you just need to run ahead of me, and so I can keep eyes on you, and then we will. But already the whole left and rights, they go straight out the window. So when he says look left, yeah, you can't you forget which way is left. You may as well look up. So thankfully he helped me get out, and by sheer chance, the vehicle that went and picked up my friend who was down ended up stopping temporarily, and I just I don't know, I just quickly got up and got in the vehicle just to get on the exfil, and then I ended up having to do basically like give medical assistance to my friend who was down, and yeah, so in the back of the vehicle, I'm yelling at the Ukrainian driver to keep his eyes on the road, because he was that scared. That you can't account for that. There's no blame on him whatsoever, but he was just all over the place, running very, very big risks I wasn't willing to take. And so yeah, I ended up just trying to coordinate him, and then also trying to keep my mate alive. And yeah, and to be honest, when it comes down to it, I think it ended up being a 15 to 20-minute drive from where we got picked up to the nearest field hospital.
Right.
Field hospital is just anything. It could be someone's basement, or it could be a hospital, it could be a school, it could be anything. And it's just where they quickly patch you up in whatever way they can, and then they get you on the nearest ambulance or civilian vehicle, and they will just get you out as quickly as they can to a safer area.
Right.
So they have a extremely good level of coordination when it comes to their field hospitals. So I have to give them a lot of credit for that. But yeah, pretty rough experience. But I ended up just singing "Don't Worry, Be Happy" to my mate. And yeah, he says he doesn't remember it because he's too in and out. I'm like, oh, thank God, because I think the singing voice probably would have killed him. Yeah.
And is he's still alive?
Yeah, he made it miraculously.
Yeah.
I was taking his pulse, and it was, yeah, if it was me, he definitely died. But they saved him because I wasn't getting a pulse from him whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah, so miraculously he's still alive.
And you mentioned to me before we went on about paying for your own medical treatment. Can you talk me through this?
Paying, sorry.
Yeah, paying out of pocket for medical treatment.
Yeah, so the medical treatment is pretty good. If you want like advanced care, if you want to be comfortable, you have to flick some money to the right hands. Unfortunately, I didn't when it happened to me, I had no money. So I was pretty much stuck between a rock and a hard place. Yeah, it can get pretty irritating. It's because they just don't have the level, they don't have the equipment, they don't have the manpower, and they just don't have the facilitation to be taking the best care of you. A lot of the time it's self-sourced.
Who's this money going to, though? Is it going to the doctor? Is it going to the nurse? Like,
I know for a fact that had to pay some nurses to give extra attention to some casualties. And it could be as much as say $30, it could be $50, it could be 100. But you want to make sure that that person is taken care of, and so you just fork it out. If you've got, in our case, there was in one of the hospitals, there was two nurses, and these two nurses had to cover probably about 60 to 80 people.
right.
And yeah, unfortunately, if you really want their attention and you want their attention in the best way possible, you might flick them some money.
Okay.
It's just that part of the world just runs a little bit differently. So when I say like hospital nurses and care and all this kind of stuff, people, especially from Australia, seem to think, oh well, like shouldn't be too bad. But yeah, you have to a lot of the time source your own toilet paper, source your own water. If you want any like sometimes edible food, you've got to source that too. Otherwise, you've just got to endure.
What about like medical resources? Bandages, drugs, things like that in the hospital. Is that paid, or is that come with?
No, that's all part of the parcel. That just comes with it. Yeah, that's not paid for.
Yeah. So it's more just paying, slipping some money for some extra care within that hospital because they're so. Sorry, I somewhat misinterpreted what you said offline. I almost took it as like, if you want this bandage, swipe your card.
No, it's not that. It's a lot of the time it's just they don't have resources. I know oral medications. I needed some oral medication because I was supposed to be doing this this really long trip, and so they had walked into this room and I saw them do it. They walked into this room and they just started sifting through a bunch of medications that had clearly been donated from different nations and stuff. And it was just luck of the draw what you got, because they don't have any of their own. So in my case, I was given like an Italian Panadol.
Right.
And so they are just so stretched and they don't have facilitation for it. So it can come at a price. In my case, it was all medications were delivered in the butt cheek. So, I mean, that sucks, especially if you're getting, making 12 needles a day.
Yeah.
One antibiotics, or you're getting basically some kind of liquid Panadol. But it just sucks.
Yeah, it just seems a bit funny with like some of that stuff, because you're like, so much has been donated that no one should be having to pay for care or attention or whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely rough to think about where it's any. I know one of the hospitals I stayed in, it was a community hospital, so it was completely like publicly funded and stuff like that. And this hospital was just so far stretched that clean sheets, mattresses, showers, any kind of that. It was very, very difficult. It was a difficult place to be in. And mainly because you just felt so bad for them that they weren't, whatever was getting donated might have been donated to the front.
Right.
And then it just goes straight over east. Now you have to make sure that the people who are in the east are coordinated. They know their logistics. That their vehicles don't get destroyed. That their building stores don't get destroyed.
Yeah.
So it's just a very, very difficult to find out where this stuff is going.
Is it getting east that you saw? Is this humanitarian sort of aid stuff getting east?
The field hospital was pretty good. I guess maybe because they had foreigners working as their say surgical team, or they could have a few people from the UK who are just ambulance drivers or something. But it's very, very difficult to tell. I know that you in a field hospital, we were pretty well taken care of, except their capability completely stops at pain medication and bandages. Just stops there. If they can get you to a point where they may be able to take off your tourniquet, and that's it. That's when they'll rush you to these other hospitals. And I know as soon as it happened, as soon as I got out of the field hospital, I was put on a 40-minute ambulance that ended up being an hour, and then put in a person's car, and then moved for about 4 hours when I was told it was going to be 40 minutes. And then from there, then I was moved and get another 7 hours, and it just I had no pain medication whatsoever. So it was pretty much agonizing experience. But they're trying to figure out where you're going to go and how they can treat you and what capability they need. We got to one hospital and they just said that they had no beds available, and it was impossible for one of my friends to be treated there. So he was then put in an ambulance, and I just stayed with him. So I'm like, no, I'm not gonna leave him. We're all gonna go to the same hospital. And so, I actually feel horrendous for the medical system there, because there's a war going on, but there's still people who are just sick, or they needed a surgery, or they've broken their leg on the playground. They've still just got normal people having normal injuries, and they're getting put with basically critically wounded soldiers. And it's a really, really, really is a grim experience, and it's pretty confronting. And you just don't, like in one case, I know particularly, and I still to this day feel quite awful about it, but I'd seen a little girl who'd copped fragmentation injury, and she was missing a limb, and she'd basically the left side of her face was pretty much unrecognizable, and she was put in a room with 8 other guys who'd been pretty much in the same area. And all these guys, they were completely blown apart. They'd been shot, they'd been burnt, some of them had limbs missing and stuff as well. And this poor little girl, a civilian, gets put in the same category. And it was just very, very very grim experience.
And can you talk us through the pay situation? Because you said that you're meant to receive like a few months of pay, and you only got like half a month, and you struggled for money once you got injured?
Yeah. So we so you do get paid. Like you're not a mercenary for hire. You're not doing it. You get paid because you essentially become a member of the Ukrainian army. And they don't pay you much. I think all up, if you were on the front line, fighting, you were supposed to get, it was about 1,400 Australian dollars for the month.
Yes.
And that was your pay.
So
I think
300 a
some,
week. Well, 350. Yeah, right.
yeah, about 350 a week, maybe.
Which is
By the
about,
time
so I'm
that,
just trying to American deal. So that's like
yeah,
$230 American, say.
yeah. I don't know. I really should have said that one.
No,
It was more general.
that's on me, bro.
But yeah, so I'd been there for a month, didn't get paid. We was there for the second month, and I think I ended up getting paid for about half a month or three-quarters of a month, about halfway through that one. So
Right.
in 2 months, I got paid three-quarters of a month's pay. And I'd been in Frontline as well, so I was supposed to make more, and I didn't. Um, it's fine. It puts you in a tough spot because I went there completely voluntarily. I thought, oh, I'm not going to get paid at all. And if I get paid, I'm just going to accumulate that money, and I'm just going to, buy medical equipment or buy something that I can give back to that country.
Yeah.
But it got me in a tough spot because when I got hit, I actually hadn't been paid, and I had the only way, I didn't have my wallet. The only way that I could actually buy things was asking my friend, hey, can you please get me a water, or can you please get me something to eat? And so it put me in a really tough spot. Thankfully, pay came through probably about 4 days after that. But it's not much. If you do it for money, you can make money significantly easier doing significantly less.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of sucks. Again, I think they're still just figuring out I guess their accounting situation. Some guys get paid, they could get paid half the amount of money. Then some people get paid more, and they're doing the exact same job in the exact same unit. So it didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Have you seen the rest of that money that you were owed?
No, I haven't chased it up either. I really don't really know who I would chase up with anyway. But I've resigned that. I'm happy to be alive.
Yeah.
I don't need it. It's fine. I'm back home. So it's hopefully in better hands. That's the way that I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with your experience, would you recommend fighters to go, or like if you had no injury, would you go back?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I'd still be there fighting if I could. I would go back tomorrow.
Right.
I still feel absolutely devout with the cause, and I loved the people that I met. I loved being there. I hated the circumstances that were there. But you the amount of innocent civilians and stuff that are getting wrapped up in this and getting killed, and they're just trying to live their normal life. I could not be here at home comfortably knowing that that's going on in a different country. I still feel that to this day, that one of the biggest struggles I have is that I see myself and my friends and all that living just their normal life that's casual as anything, and I'm waiting for that point that over in Ukraine people are doing the exact same thing, except they're running a gauntlet of their life every time they leave their house, and even when they stay inside their house. So for me personally, I would absolutely do it, but I guess to recommend it to anybody is not something that I would do.
Yeah.
You've got to be a different person, definitely a different breed of person, and you've got to be switched on enough to be aware of what you're walking into. You're outnumbered, you're outgunned. They're outnumbering you with logistics. You're not going to eat well. You're not going to get paid well. You're bloody not going to sleep well either. it sucks. It's a terrible existence, but there's people out there, such as myself, who seem to really thrive and really enjoy it, because it's the people that you're with that make it, and the people are also like-minded in that sense that, every day someone would tell a joke, and like, the hell are we doing here? What are we doing here? But what we're doing here is we're being together, and we're unifying to try to fight this enemy. It's quite an emotional experience when you realize that these guys who don't know each other, are willing to put their lives completely on the line just to save one another. They might have only met a week before,
Yes,
and they're taking bullets for each other. So it's a very strong sense of camaraderie and very strong unification on the cause. So, not a lot of guys that I even know had just, even knew someone from Ukraine. So they just came in as like, nah, we've got to fight. We can't let this huge powerhouse just overrun this country. Just for freedoms. And if they do that and they succeed, then what's next? What standards does it leave for the rest of the world? I feel like a lot of comfort in knowing that, because the world has seen this unfold, that it maybe it'll deter anyone else from invading another country later on. I hold on to that faith. I'm an optimist.
Yeah. You mentioned that you're outgunned, you're outnumbered, and you're out the better logistics. Do you think Ukraine is having a big effect on the Russian force, or do you think Ukraine's winning this? At least at your time, I know it was a while back.
From my time, no, they're not. However, what was very much unfaltering is people's opinion. So the general opinion from all the Ukrainians that I'd met and who I'd heard from, they were literally willing to sit in their house and die rather than have their land be taken by Russians.
Yes.
Absolute warriors, like warrior people. They don't give up. So when I were there, it felt very much like the Russians are winning, but they're not winning in fashion. They are prying their way through, gritting their teeth. They're not getting far, and they kind of have to probably rethink what they're doing and what they're willing to take, because it's coming at a huge cost to them as well.
Yes. Yeah, a huge cost of young men's lives and civilians on either side. I guess there's always an element, I guess, of, at least from my opinion, empathy of it doesn't. I don't either side. There's a level of empathy towards young men being thrown into a slaughterhouse. You don't make those decisions. It's the old saying of old men talking and young men dying, I guess, on both.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's just crazy to think that this is happening within our time, and it's 2022,
it's World War stuff. I know it's
absolutely the age of TikTok and mad memes, and this is happening like World War One.
I know. You watch the war unfold on TikTok and my fucking Instagram. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely unbelievable. Yeah, absolutely. I think well, hopefully people in Australia just don't see it as a TikTok meme, and they don't think as a trend, and they move on. Hopefully people keep it in their brain a little bit.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, because it's from all my stuff, and I've been fairly heavily involved here since before the beginning. It seems like a lot of the support is drying up. It's not as trending in the media. And I guess I look at maps pretty much all day at the moment.
Yeah.
And it seems that Russia is taking a large amount of ground. Where this leads, no one knows, I guess.
Yeah. Absolutely, no one knows. Yeah, and what's the end goal? What's the aftermath? What's it going to be? I know me personally. I think it's going to be a very, very long time before Russia can even be, forgiven. And that's just me, unfortunately. I lived through it, experienced it, and I still feel very, very shaky, very, very like almost like adrenaline starts to hit me as soon as I find out that someone is Russian. Now there's a
Right.
lot of innocent people, yeah. But I went out the other day, and one of the guys had jokingly made a statement to somebody else that, like, well, you're Russian, you can do this, and in the back of my head, I just pretty much seized up, like, I've actually got to get out of this situation. Because I just can't, not ready to face them as being human yet. It's a very, very difficult thing to put yourself in a mental state where you're going to war. You're going to be fighting these people. You can't, you've got to have a certain level of almost disregard.
Yeah.
And it's very, very difficult to kind of get that back. At least while this invasion is still going on, I'll find it very, very difficult to have kind words.
Yeah.
So I
Just
choose
about
to just
Russians in general, not just the
yeah,
leadership and
yeah,
military. Yeah,
absolutely.
right.
Yeah, I just choose to create distance. I
Right.
try to avoid it.
Yeah, and that's something we've seen, I guess, a lot, and it's more openly accepted in this conflict. At least trying to be an observer of it is, if when America went to war with ISIS, like the Islamic State, if you put up an Instagram status that said fuck Islam, people would ridicule you and be like, it's not all Islamic people and blah blah blah, which is correct. But if I put up a status, or you did, of fuck Russia, it would be fine.
Yeah,
And but of course on the same side, it's, you're like, well, it's not all Russians and it's not this, and it's a hard one, and it's just an observation. I'm not saying I agree or disagree on either side. I'm saying an observation of, even Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and stuff have lifted some of the hate speech laws, or I should say community standards more, that they've got against Russia, which, like, it's like it's a bit of a double standard there, that you're like, it's a
absolutely.
weird
Yeah,
thing, and my empathy to a degree comes in, and I'm happy for people to disagree. Is like, I think there's this, a lot of people in the West think that a lot of the young Russians have like the access to media and everything that we do, and you're like, well, a lot of these dudes out there, some of them didn't even know they were going to war, or they've had their head filled with
absolutely. Yeah,
propaganda. Like, you can't just load up, Sky News or the Project on telly. It's just a hard one. I'm trying to be like a passive observer of it. And
it is very difficult
yeah,
for all these guys fighting. There's an entire nation behind an iron curtain which are suffering,
yeah,
suffering because of this.
yeah,
I do know about one Russian family who I know from back Australia, and I haven't communicated with them very much, but they're telling me that their family were working for free, like in
yeah,
in a munitions factory. So
yeah,
they weren't
right.
getting paid. They would literally rock up.
Mm.
You rock up and you get fed, and that's it.
Yeah,
So they are suffering, and I'm sure the general consensus is, why the hell are we there? Why are you doing this?
yeah,
And that's what I do actually feel for them. But yeah, due to I don't want to even have a heated discussion, and I'm afraid
yeah,
of talking to even Russians in Australia or in America, or somewhere else in Europe,
mm.
by the sheer chance that they may say that they agree, or that they may be opposed to Ukraine, or they might try to tell me, the reason why it's happening. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, it's just not something that I'm ready to hear just yet.
yeah. Oh,
Um,
and each to their own as well.
absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've had a lot more recently of people, because I have a fairly large platform. A lot more people recently, sort of spreading, or at least saying that they're very pro-Russian, pro Z, blah blah blah, which is an interesting thing to me, especially if these are young Australian people or Westerners. It's a very interesting discussion to have with them of, why are you this? It's
To be honest, I'd be very, very interested in that too. Yeah, it's very,
yeah,
very interesting.
and that's a rabbit hole I'm actually trying to, because the problem is with some of these is lots of people will DM me or comment or whatever, like, I'm pro Putin, pro Z, blah blah blah, and I'm like, hey, would you actually like to talk to me about it, and I'll listen to your points. No, and I'm like, well, that's it's a hard discussion to have, because I'm willing to hear someone out and
Yeah,
whatever.
you want to be as non-biased as possible. You've got to get the full picture.
Yeah. And
yeah,
that's what I say to people. Like, I think the best way to actually get any intelligence on this is follow all the Telegram groups from the pro-Russian to pro-Ukraine and absorb all of it, and then try and find a middle ground somewhere, because
yeah,
it is very man, I've been involved here for, as you know, months now. And it's so hard to see what's up. But I know, yeah, recently definitely there's been this turn that I've found in. Well, there's been two big things I've found with having a sort of audience to have a look at, is how many people have dropped off the sort of bandwagon of caring.
yeah.
And then how many people now are starting to have switched across to, like, hey, Willie, I like what you're doing, I like this, but I'm pro Putin, pro Z. And it's just a funny observation that I've had.
I think on that, I think if they did think that way, you'd definitely take on board what they're saying, but then you'd recommend to them, like, hey, you know what, I want you to go over to Ukraine, and I want you to work in, just volunteer in a hospital, or volunteer in a school, or
Yeah,
volunteer in a firefighter, or help to rebuild infrastructure, even just go there on it's bizarre, but go there on a holiday to fuel local economy. And I think if you're privileged enough to live in Australia and have the opinion, it means that you kind of don't have your much roots to the ground over there. If you go there, you'd say, maybe they might be pro Putin, or they might be pro Russia, but they maybe would change their open opinion to be like, I don't support any, I don't support Ukraine, and I don't support Russia. Just because they would experience and see the damage inflicted. It's not about land. It's not about, the politics. It's the everyday people is what's going to change your mind, and the everyday people, the amount of suffering that they are going through, just senselessly, And I hope that anyone who feels that way, the pro Russia and everything, I hope that they actually go and do something to gain whether that's the right opinion that they should be on. You try to be as absolutely non-biased as possible.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to do in the age of social media, and the age, I think, where people have less faith in news and governments. Like, at least I know personally, I have just no faith in the news or the government to tell me the truth about things. And I think, I think that we have this identity sort of problem where you're either progressive or conservative, and it's like, if you're progressive and then you're pro-Ukraine, if you're conservative and you're pro-Russian, like, no, there's overlap in all of this. You can be one, or you don't have to be one or the other. But I think a lot of people have this stance of that they're pro X country because they've almost been told, well, that side, I don't like Joe Biden, and Joe Biden is therefore pro-Ukraine, so then I am pro-Russian. And I'm like, no, you don't just have to identify with this entire group on something because the other group isn't. And that's what I say, is I think it's more just like, it's more just people picking sides rather than being like, well, observe it and be like, oh, fuck. Because in my opinion, no one's innocent in war.
No.
But the obvious thing is one country invaded another, which, of course, one country at that point is like, well, yep, okay, they've done the wrong thing here. But I guess, but in a war, in my opinion, is no one's truly innocent. It's just such a it's such a shit fight. I was talking to a Ukrainian just before this call about the complexity of this issue, and it's like everyone from everywhere has, oh, it's simple, it's this or it's that, and it's like, no, it's this whole, it's such a complex issue with the world's involvement, the Western's involvement, and it's like, it's so much more complex than a lot of people might like to simplify it down to. A lot of people simplify it to like evil country, or even down to West proxy war, and it's like there's no simplification, because it's all of this stuff all in one. Like, stop trying to simplify an incredibly hard thing down to one piece. It's hard, yeah.
It's very, very hard. And I mean, it's pretty straight down the middle, this one. This one's pretty straight down the middle. You know, this country invaded. That's why. All right, what's going to happen, say, if we push Russia all the way back to their border, then what happens? Well, you go home. The war might still be going, but you've done your job. You've stopped your invasion. You're not there for the politics. You're not there for, you know, to trying to choose a side from one culture to another culture. You know, it's just cut and dry.
Do you think the West? Do you think the West should be involved more than they are?
I actually think they should be, especially even representatives. So maybe not even sending armies or someone who fights, but someone who can take charge in their industries and in their fields. You know, I would absolutely have loved it if I had an American logistics system that was helping support us. And then you might have had, you know, say something would be non-combative. You've got semi countries to go and assist them in that way.
Yes.
So direct lines to consider non-combative. Australian government seem to think otherwise, but you're training people not even just to shoot, but training people their medical ability. You know, you could be training their attitude. You could be training work computers so they can stop rockets. I feel that we've got a lot more that we could do. Just sending pieces of equipment it's good, it's fantastic, but it's not enough if you're sending this unknown piece of equipment to people that might not know how to use it or not know how it works with a like say an all arms call. You know, they might know how to drive a PMV, but how do you operate a PMV? You just need that consultation. Yeah, you just need that consultation. You know, you need. I'd absolutely love it if there was representatives just working in warehouses, just making sure that nothing was stolen.
Yes.
When we think about it, it's still a quite country, so you can only assume that people might be hoarding some of the stores that have come from the West, but you know, come from any other nation.
Yeah.
So it'd be good if we just had a little bit more boots on the ground, coordinate this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Sorry, mate. I'm just dropping out a little bit with my internet here, but we might just wrap it up. But mate, I really
absolutely.
Unless is there anything else you'd like to share before we?
No, we're good. Yeah, no, you've done a fantastic job interviewing me. So.
I'd rather
you could have done this before, Willie.
I'd rather it over a beer, mate, somewhere else. But I do really appreciate your time.
No, I'm working really, really hard to try to convince my family to let me go back over there, even for just the humanitarian. And so hopefully, maybe within the next few months we can have a beer over in Ukraine.
Yeah, Ukraine beers are good, and so is the Salo and the vodka.
Oh, bloody good! Yeah, so you guys want to get drunk really, really cheap? That's just the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. Righto. Yeah. Thank you so much, mate. I'll speak to you offline anyway, brother.
All right. Thanks very much, mate.
Thank you, mate. Okay.